Okie dokie. We are back for our third segment here with Dr. Professor Paul Ohlers and my co-host Kyle Brandon. I'm Greg Smith, and this is Greatest Scene Ever. It's kind of a wrap-up show, or wrap-up of this edition at this location of Greatest Scene Ever. We'll be back, don't worry, but this is kind of our wrap-up here. So we invited Paul back, who was one of the original co-hosts of the program, to talk about if I had to say three films, no screwing around, Desert Island, 3 films, what would your choices be?
So the first film I thought I'd talk about is Brazil by Terry Gilliam.
Good.
And the reason I like Brazil, Brazil, of course, has this reference to 1984 by George Orwell, and it has the sort of Terry Gilliam, Monty Python-esque style. But the reason I really like Brazil is Brazil, as a movie, kind of shows how a director can have a vision of a script, and the executives didn't really understand it, and it got to this point where he wanted to release this film, and they're like, well, how can we make money off of this? And they didn't really understand what the idea of this movie was, and he said, just trust my vision.
To this day, there are people that don't understand what that
and
movie is all about.
But the thing that's really interesting to me about that movie is that it shows how somebody can have a vision, and the executives are trying to change it and be so totally wrong about it, that when he tried to release it, they basically held his movie hostage. And it wasn't until the critics all sort of snuck to the Beverly Hills Gun Club and watched it, which was the only place in Los Angeles where the film companies didn't sort of have a sense of what was being shown there. That's why they showed it there.
I never knew that. I never knew the Gun Club started.
And so that's why it won the LA Film Critics Award, and they were forced to release his version.
That's funny.
Because they had recut a version that was completely different than his version.
I never knew about the Gun Club.
So that's why it sort of had limited commercial success, because they sort of reluctantly released his version. But to me, it's a great film. That sort of, it was a successful failure in that it successfully showed what he wanted. But they just, they didn't support it. Yeah,
well, he was a quirky director and didn't have a lot of critical success, and he made some very quirky, oddball films. I actually think of Paul Thomas Anderson sometimes when I think of Terry Gilliam, just in terms of kind of weirdness, kind of Moonrise Kingdom, or some of the other quirky films that are out there.
No, I think Wes Anderson.
I said Wes. I said Paul Thomas Anderson earlier, but I'm throwing Wes Anderson in that mix as well. I meant both. I said it the wrong way, but especially Wes Anderson stuff. But but with the two of them, kind of quirky, not mainstream type of stuff. You mentioned 3 very mainstream directors earlier, and now here you're bringing out a film which is very much as far out of the stream as could be, as if a lot of Hollywood directors would.
Which is why I sort of couldn't narrow it down to 3 choices.
I know it's tough. It's tough, but you have to do it, and you have to give me a number 2.
Okay, so my number 2 choice is actually, it's funny you mentioned Paul Thomas Anderson, is Magnolia.
That's why it was in my head. Yeah.
And the reason that I chose Magnolia is to me I thought about There Will Be Blood, but Magnolia is such a strong ensemble piece, and the thing I like about Magnolia is there's all these levels of sort of subtext that go on about sort of finding patterns in randomness and hidden meanings of things, and there's all like the Masonic kind of undertext that you don't know about if you just watch it in sort of a superficial level. So it's a movie that's watchable multiple times. Hundreds of times, and you can find some new element that sort of ties everything together, and that's a huge strength for me in making it a desert island movie that is watchable over and over again.
I agree. Although for my money, as you mentioned, There Will Be Blood is kind of higher on the list. What about you? How would you weigh in on P.T. Anderson on? Would you put Magnolia?
They're all great. I can't
Magnolia,
speak to any of it really falling below the other. But I think for me, Boogie Nights just has a really specific, special place because of his first moment. It's me discovering him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never actually saw Hard 8, so I don't know his previous film.
What?
I never saw Hard 8.
Oh,
It's the only film by him I haven't seen. but sort of discovering him and the way he approaches things.
Yeah.
And Boogie Nights also,
Yeah.
it has just enough humor
Yeah.
that sets it apart from the other ones
Yeah,
to
yeah,
some extent.
yeah.
Although, mentioning Magnolia, it's one of those moments when you remember Tom Cruise can really act when
Yeah.
he is required to actually try.
Yeah, 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 and another great performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman in that film
Yeah.
as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a standard.
yeah,
You know, outside of There Will Be Blood, I believe he's been in
Yeah.
pretty much every P.T. Anderson film,
that's right.
Yeah.
or nearly. Anyway,
That's true, and he'll be missed, just
Yeah.
like Tom Cruise. He'll be missed as well. Although that was suicide. And your third film, speaking of
we
suicide,
missed Tom Cruise's career, I guess, even though it's still
he will,
happening.
he will be missed.
It's sort of like
Tom Cruise will
you're
be
talking
missed.
about the SNL thing where they kept going to and in memoriam John Lovitz. And they
Yes,
kept
yes,
showing it, they
that's
kept cutting away to him.
I feel about Tom Cruise's career sometimes. So
so-
we're moving on
so-
to the third film.
so the
Speaking
third
of
film-
suicide,
So the third film, I thought of a greatest scene, which is one scene. The whole movie is essentially one scene, which is Birdman.
that's cheating, by the way. That's a huge cheat, although it's a genius cheat.
It's, I mean,
Because the
but
whole scene is one movie.
Yeah, I mean,
the whole
that's-
movie's one scene. Right?
It's shot as one scene, but the thing that really speaks to me as far as that is somebody who creates art themselves. I struggle with that internal sort of dialogue all the time, which is how do I do something that, sort of the man on the street admires as a commercial success or is approachable, and sort of the artistic community values as well. I mean, there's this sort of disconnect that goes on in the artistic world, where if people like it and it sells a lot of copies, it must not be good.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't have to be unique, but there's this perception that that's what it is.
Yeah.
That just because it does well commercially means it's not a success.
Yeah.
And how did he goes through that struggle, and in the end, to me, what he finds is it's not about either of those things.
Yeah.
It's about finding that within himself.
Yeah.
But that's all, for him to go through that journey for that film is something that spoke to me in a very personal way. So,
And I still think he's the best actor of last year. I will still hold out and say, but this is why we don't live and die by the Oscars.
Well,
it's very subjective. It's very political. It's this and that. But just a standout performance. And I'm a Michael Keaton fan from
I grew
back
up on
in the
him.
day,
I
from
love
Mr.
Michael
Mom
Keaton.
days and
Sure.
even the early Batman films
Yeah.
and even his cameo, which I saw the other night when I was rewatching Out of Sight
Oh,
with George Lopez and the very watchable Jennifer Lopez. That you look at her and you say, she's a great actress in one film.
Right,
And there's Michael Keaton with a tiny role,
and
but
he's
it's
playing
great.
the same character that he played in Jackie Brown,
Yes, exactly right.
crossing
Ray
over
Nicolette.
between two Elmer Leonard films.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And plays it wonderfully.
Yeah.
And Birdman just brings it all together.
I loved Birdman. I think Birdman all around had some really
I did too.
standout performances.
Yeah.
No one in there did I expect to be bad.
Yeah.
But watching it was just like,
Yeah.
this is got so much going on behind people's eyes and so many great deliveries and interactions.
Yeah.
And and I think that movie's a fantastic choice.
And I think we had really good luck last year with two standout films, which I think will stand the test of time. That's the other thing for me that the Oscars don't do, is they quite often will get it wrong in terms of what we watch down the line, longevity.
Sure.
Some of the films we saw today, that we talked about today, didn't do well at the Academy Awards. But are you could not leave them off your top list.
I mean, it's not one of the ones we watched today, but I always think of, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm pulling this out of the back of my brain.
You're wrong.
But didn't Casablanca lose? And
I
something
believe so.
no one remembers
Who's
won
got
that
a-
year?
Yeah, we can't pretend to know. Who's got a
I don't
computer
wanna
out
fake
there?
it.
But I
year-
think you're right.
Yeah.
I think it won for other, or was nominated for other things, but wasn't nominated for Best Picture.
Right, and
if
no
I'm
one
not
remembers the
mistaken.
film that won.
Yeah.
I think that's the story that, when citing a
And that
great
often,
film.
that very often will happen.
and I think the year of It's a Wonderful Life was the same year as
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind. So I mean,
And
there
Wizard
could
of
be-
Oz.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All right. Yeah. So I mean, it's
absolutely run up against that. Well, we've also run up against the clock once again, and for our entire series, and that's all the time we have for Greatest Scene Ever. We're going to close today by reading from another passage from our website's homepage. In addition to having fun watching great film clips, our secret mission is to provide a conversation that's enlightening and educating by providing the academic context in which these films are seen by audiences. We hope we fulfill that mission and that you've enjoyed watching this series as much as we have in presenting it. Carlos?
Now, as we always say, this program doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Yep.
It takes a ton of people to make it happen.
That's right.
We've had dozens of students, professors, staff here at AU helping us along over the years. We've got some special shout-outs for Jeffrey Madison and the staff at the Media Production Center, Frank Fitzmaurice and Jeff Turner, and the crew of the equipment room, Professor Sarah Mankyfish, who used to do a segment for us.
We love Sarah.
Professor Paul Ohlers, of course, sitting next to me. Professors John Douglas, my boss, and Russell Williams, a good colleague here.
Better
And
hurry,
of
we're going to
course-
lose the set.
Of course, the Dean of the School of Communications, Jeffrey Rutenbeck. Thank
Absolutely.
you all. Anyone who's ever done anything, gotten us coffee, shot on the show,
right, that's
or
right.
helped us
That's
build
right.
the set.
Take
Take
a
a shot
sip.
on the set.
So a shout outs to Brigida Sunderland, Alicia Morris, Joseph Joyce, Danny Rizzo, Michael Wargo, and the many students, some of whom are helping us break down the set. We're losing everything. It's a fire sale. Thank you, everybody, for volunteering your time and energies over the years. We truly couldn't have done it without you. So for now, I'm Greg. He's Kylos. And this is
Kylos.
Paul. Happy trails to you until we meet again. This is greatest scene ever.